Yes, hi guys. So welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how the DOM works and what is the DOM in JavaScript and in HTML. So this is the DOM as a tree. So the DOM is basically a tree-like structure or a system that basically converts HTML into DOM objects, into objects which we can work with dynamically using JavaScript. So have you ever wondered how websites understand and organize their content? So behind every web page is a powerful document object model system, and the DOM is a representation of the HTML content of a web page. So the DOM essentially is a representation of the HTML content as objects, all right? And then it turns HTML into an object-oriented tree that your browser and JavaScript can interact with, enabling developers to dynamically read, change, and add, remove contents in the page. So in our table of contents, we have the introduction to DOM, why the DOM matters, how the DOM works, and then interacting with the DOM using JavaScript, DOM events and event handling. And then we talk about the browser's rendering process with the DOM. We talk about common pitfalls and then a conclusion. So an introduction of what is the DOM. So to understand what the DOM is, let's take an example with a school system where at the top we have the principal, the deputy, followed by the teachers, and finally the students. And then each student belongs to a specific class and they have a unique admission number and can be identified easily within the system. So in the same way, the DOM organizes a web page's content into a structured hierarchy, and the top level is the document. So which acts like the principal, and it's the global entry point to the entire web page. And then inside the document, we have different elements, e.g. sections, paragraphs, buttons, and the elements are organized like departments and classes. So just like the school system, which lets us easily find a student, the DOM provides methods like document.getElement by ID. So the document we said is the root element, which is an object. And then it has methods which can help us quickly locate and interact with any specific element using its unique ID. So in summary, the DOM transforms your HTML into an object-oriented tree that both your browser and JavaScript can access, read from, or modify, allowing dynamic and interactive web experiences. So I do have a Miro board open here. So let me just draw a school. All right. Drawing a straight line is a bit hectic, but it's okay. This is a school. So imagine a school whereby the classes are not labeled. We have all these are classes. We have washrooms that look like classes. We have everyone is scattered everywhere. No one has a unique ID. No one has anything. No one. So all these are students. Students are mixed with teachers, and teachers wear like students. Teachers don't have a title. And then you as a parent, this is the gate. You as a parent, you are coming to check on your student or your child. This would be a very chaotic system whereby it would be very difficult to find your student, because let's assume you have 1,000 students here. It would be very chaotic for you to even tell someone go look for so and so. They don't know them. So it is very difficult. So the next thing we can talk about is a structured school, whereby these are classes labeled. This one is A, B, C. So we have 1A, 1B, 1C. And then your student is in 1A and they have an ID number of 6452, right? So this is the admission number. We have the school's administration block, whereby we have a reception, we have the deputy, we have the principal, and we have the staff room. All right. And then we have maybe the washrooms down here. We have the field here. And we have a gate here. So if a parent, that's what using this hierarchy, if a parent comes, they meet the receptionist hears that this person wants to talk with the student. The receptionist maybe forwards it to the class teacher of that specific class. Based on the ID, they can tell which class you are on. And then they take you. The class teacher goes to your class, calls your student, and then your student is here and you can talk to them. So in such a system, it's very, very easy to find your student. So similarly in JavaScript, so let me just open this. So let me clear out all this. We're going to write them one by one. So similarly in HTML, so I just created a blank HTML template. So don't worry about it. If you don't know about it, don't worry. So this is how the HTML looks like. It's created using HTML tags. So the first thing here is document identifier. So this one says this document is a HTML. And then we start the HTML itself with a HTML tag. And then inside the HTML, you have different tags. Think of this as the same way I showed you about the students. So think of this as a school. Administration block is the head. Maybe the body now is all the other school functions. We have classes, we have students. Maybe we can have, these are classes, all that kind of stuff. So I hope you do understand what I am meaning. So the next thing we need to see is that the HTML is made up of elements. So let's assume we have, so to create a heading in HTML, you use a H1, H2, H3. So these are different level elements. So you can say hello from TechWithTwin. And then, so let's go back to the HTML. No, so we can, there's an extension called live server. So let me go back and show you live. Go to the extension tab and find for function an extension called live server. So this is what serves your HTML to the browser. I don't know why mine is not even showing up. But this is what you do. Go to the extensions. So here it is. You install this extension. Let me just show you. If I close that and go back and click that icon here, open your HTML page. You install that extension and then it will show up down here. And then you click on the go live for the live server. It will open your HTML page in the browser. So, and then you can see our H1, which says hello from TechWithTwin. So the next thing we need to ask ourselves is that if this is all what we want to achieve, then there's no need of JavaScript, there's no need of the DOM. But now the problem comes in play whereby we need to change this. So let me show you. To create an input to create an input, so this one is the horizontal row I just added. To create an input, we can wrap it in a form. Then create the input and say placeholder, your name. And then you can add a button and say greet me. And then for the button, so that the button can submit the form, we add a type of submit. So if you go back, we have the input and we have the input and we have the button to submit the input, to submit the form. So think of it that the form can have many different inputs. So the form is basically helping us to group all those functionalities together. So the next thing we need to ask ourselves is that now in this scenario, we want, whenever I type in my name here, maybe my name is John, and create greet, I want to update this TechWithTwin to the name I added here. So without JavaScript, without the DOM, this would be very much impossible. So we do have the HTML. we said the HTML is transformed into an object like tree. So if we go back here and we go back here, you can see the HTML is like, we have the root document, which now creates array representation of the HTML items in an object way. And in this, we are able to access elements. We are able to access elements in the HTML DOM. So we can access the H1, we can access this, we can access the form, we can access the input, we can access anything. And the next thing we can do is that we can act on events. So an event is like someone clicks the button. That's an event. We want to submit the form. So someone tries to highlight. Someone does something. Someone double clicks on this item. So we need to act on these events. And then using the DOM and JavaScript, we are able to insert items dynamically. Let me just show you. So let me add another button. So, I also forgot, I need to add the script here. And then, okay, so I don't know. So let's work on this first. And then in our HTML crash course, we'll talk about how the events work, how they work, and all that. So the first thing we need to do, we need to understand the logics behind what we want to achieve. So let me do all these. I want to show them side by side. All right, so it is nice. So we need to, the first thing we need to do is to act on the action of clicking this button. So we want to act on the action of clicking this button. And since this button is in a form, we can come here and create a function called _submit, which receives an event. All right. And then this is a form. So to submit a form, you have an attribute called onSubmit. So on submit, whenever you submit this form, what do you want us to do? We call the submit function and then pass it the event of submitting the form. So we have an issue with that, is that by default, a form in HTML tries to submit these details. So let me show you. So if I add a name here and say name equals name. So let's do this. So if I added that, as I told the input to be called the name, if I say TechWithTwin and click, you can see on top of the URL, JavaScript. No, the HTML default way of doing things is that it navigates to an URL. Let me just explain. So it goes to another URL and adds these items as parameters. So to prevent this default behavior, there's something we can do. And also something you need to understand is you need to pass the event itself. Don't pass any random stuff here. Don't pass don't pass what? Pass the event, because the event is a keyword. It's a keyword available in the HTML forms, all right? Or the event itself. You need to use this special keyword. So to prevent the form from submitting, we can call the event and call a function called prevent default. So this one prevents the form from submitting. So if I do Boniface minor there, no form is being submitted. And then if I can alert there, you can see the alert. So whatever we are doing is that we have successfully acted on the action of submitting the form. We have prevented the default behavior. And then finally, we are able to do some other things. All right. So let's focus on our project, our process. What do we want to do? The first thing we need to do is to get access to this element. And to do that, we have so many different ways to do it. But because I only have one H1 here, I can get it using the simplest of all. So it should be my heading tag is equals to, we call the document available in the DOM. And then there's a method called query selector. Then we select a h1. Because we only have one h1, this one will go ahead and select our h1. In case we had many, we could, for instance, add a class of my h1. Then to access a h1 a class, you use the dot. Then in case this one was an ID, to access an ID, you do the hash. All right. Yeah. So, but for instance, since I just have one h1, I can do that. The next thing we need is a reference to the input field so that we can get the value itself. So we can say my input. So I'm just creating a variable, then call the document dot query selector, and then this time we select the input. So we can select by tag, we can select by ID, we can select by class name, and then we have other methods. So we have document dot get element. You can see we can get element by ID, we can get element by class name, we can get element by tag name. All these methods are available for us for free to use, but you use just the best method available. So we have our input, we have our h1. So the next thing we need to do is to get the value. So we can say my input value. And then to get the value, we call the input itself my input dot value, right? And then the next thing we need to do is to update the h1. So we can do my h1 dot text content. So text content is whatever is between the h1. So this is the text content is equals to, we can now change the text content to hello from John. No, from the value that was entered, my input value. So is it clear? Is it? I hope this is all clear, because the first thing we are doing is getting a reference for that element. And how do you get the reference? You get the reference by using the document. So the document is the whole document, which is the DOM, because the DOM is an object representation of the HTML. So the document.query selector, similar way we were going to a classroom and getting a student with the student ID, is the same way we can get an item in the DOM or an element in the DOM using different methods. So let me give you a scenario. So you say this is our class. We have the parent is coming. So this is the parent. The parent is coming to see their children. They go to the reception. The reception informs the class teacher. So the class teacher has different ways to access the student. One of the ways, assume there is another student. There's another teacher teaching at that point. So the class teacher would call that teacher, and then the teacher sends the student to the staff room. That's one way. The other way is the teacher would directly go there and get them. And that's another way. The teacher would send, maybe there's a student here that was coming to do something. The staff room would be sent to get that. So we have so many different ways to get an element in the HTML. So the same way we have so many different ways to get an element, to get a student in the class, we have so many ways to get an element in the DOM, because the DOM provides us. So we can get const my h1 second way is equals to, we can do document dot get element by tag name. This is the tag. So the tag name is h1. So we have so many ways. So this is exactly equals to this. And if we did append a class here, my h1, we can access that element using the class, using my h1 third way is equals to document dot get element by class name, because we added a class, and then we get my h1. All these are exactly similar. So it's just a matter of preference, and the maybe you can consider the speed of execution. But for instance, since I have only one h1, I can get it this way. So this is a newer way of doing things. And then we get our input. We prevent the default behavior of the forms. We grab the input value, and then we assign a new text content to the h1. All right. And then something as a bonus we could do is that we could check if we have so I've just added a guard clause whereby it is guarding to prevent an empty input being submitted. So if we do this, you see we get an empty input, and then if I write that, then it is updated. And then the final thing we need to do is, I hope you are guessing what we could do, is to empty the input field. So that's your homework for the day. So I would like to see the solutions in the comments section. So let's continue. I've already explained almost everything that we needed to know for the day. So without the DOM, the web pages would be static. Then developers wouldn't be able to dynamically change content styles, react to user LM interactions. We could do something else here. Because I have just touched on the style, we could change. We have changed the text content, and then we could say my h1 dot style dot color equals red. We can change anything essentially. So if I come here and assign myself a name of bronze, we not only change the name, and then we can change the color. As I said, if you have access to the element, you can do whatever thing you want with it. So we react to the user element interactions. We did interact to the submit. We can interact to the button clicks, double clicks, all that. We prevented the loading of the page, all that kind of stuff. And then how the DOM works, the DOM is a tree-like structure. So you have the root node, which is the document. We have elements like the HTML, the body, and then we have the div. So we also have leaves. So these are the text contents or empty elements. So the text content is exactly what is here. All right. Yeah, so the text content is whatever is in between the tags. So then we continue. Nodes and elements explained. So the node elements represent the HTML tags like the div, the h1. And then we have text nodes. So these are the actual text inside the elements. We have attribute nodes. So these are the attributes you can add to an element. So like a class, an ID, and a source. So everything in HTML becomes a node in the DOM. So the next thing is interacting with the DOM. We already saw how to interact with the DOM. You can select an element. So by selecting means getting that reference to that exact element. So we have different ways to do it. We can do it by the ID. We can do it by using the query selector. Then we could do by the tag name. And then we could do the class name. So the next thing is manipulating elements. Using JavaScript, we can change text styles and update attributes. And the first step is to select the item you want to manipulate, and then access different methods that help you achieve the desired result. So we saw how we could change the text of an element. You can change the color. You can set attributes, maybe the background image, all that. We can create or remove elements. So to create an element, you just create it and then add content to it. And then append it to there. So let's assume that whenever someone submits, we can append something new here. So just note is that we are still in the submit handler. So this is the event, because without an event, then nothing would be working. All right. So we create a new div, then we add the content to it, and then append it to the body. So if you do that, Then we see the new content has been created very fast. All right. And then the same way you can remove, you just need the reference and then remove that element. So DOM events and event handling, we saw how we could handle a click. You can do this by adding something called an event listener. So let's go ahead and create a button. So you can come here on the bottom, outside the form, you can create a button, and this button will simply alert me. All right, we have the button there. We can add a style here and say margin top or 1.5 rem. All right, that's very nice. So then we can give it a class and say alert btn. We can give it, yeah, can do that. All right, and then now we are outside the event handler. We need a reference to that button. So to get a reference of that button is const alert btn equals to document dot. We can still use the query selector, and then we get the dot alert btn. And the reason to use the dot is because in classes you need to use the dot. In IDs you use the hash, and then in the tag you don't use anything. So we create a new function. No, we don't create a function. We want to create an event listener. All right. So let me just join these two. So we want to create an event listener. So we call the button and then we add an event listener. The event listener receives two things. The first thing is what you want to listen on. We want to listen on the click. Then what function should be run. So you can create this function outside and say function handle alert clicked is a function. And then here we pass in the handler. So if someone clicks the button, you need something acted on. And essentially we add a function because the function will group the event logic. So, and then here we can say alert. Hey there. So you can say, hey there, I am alerting you. All right. So you click, you get that. So that's how you act on, you add an event listener. All right. So we can continue, and then we talk about the browser rendering process. So how does the browser render the page? So the first thing it passes is the HTML. It passes the HTML and builds the DOM. And we say the DOM is the object representation of the HTML content, which allows us to manipulate the data or the elements. The next thing is passes the CSS using something called the CSS OM tree. It combines the DOM with the CSS OM tree, creates a render tree, and then lays out the elements, determines the positions and sizes, and then finally it paints the displays on the screen. So you don't need actually to know to go deep into this. You just need to understand this is exactly what is happening. So, and then when JavaScript modifies the DOM, the browser may update part or all of this process. All right. And then the CSS object model is a data structure that represents the styles of an HTML document in a tree-like format similar to the DOM. All right, so then we talk about common pitfalls. First common pitfall is manipulating the DOM before the DOM is loaded. So you start manipulating, is like, you see where we added the script, we added the script below at the end so that everything else is rendered so that we can load our script. Because otherwise, you might start manipulating the H1 and the H1 is not yet in the browser, right? There's also another use cases where people use the inner HTML unsafely, which causes risk for cross-site scripting. And then the other one is not removing event listeners. And then you need to remove an event listener whenever you are done with it. Not whenever you're done with it, but whenever the event is over. Maybe you don't want to track the event again. So the next one is the cross-site scripting is a web security vulnerability that allows attackers to inject malicious scripts into websites viewed by other users. All right. And then best practices is you wait for the DOM to load using the document.add event listener, DOM content loaded, and then do something after that. The next one is use efficient selectors, query selectors. The query selector is often better than older methods. And then you can batch manipulation to reduce leaf flows and reprints, such that make sure you do the manipulations in one place so that they can be batched. Otherwise, they will just run indefinitely. Like this one runs, and then at the end of that event, another one is kicking in, rather than batching them all through. And then the conclusion, the DOM is an invisible structure that powers every web page. It's what lets developers create interactive, dynamic web experiences. Whether you are toggling menus, updating content, or handling user input, you are working with the DOM. So, and then mastering the DOM is fundamental. So it's also a foundation. Once you get comfortable with it, you can now start working with other frameworks like React, Vue, Angular, and then everything will make sense. Finally is follow TechWithTwin for more content. And that's it from me, guys. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and click on the bell notification. Thank you.